Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the BSHS Digital Festival 2023. This session is in conjunction with our Outreach and Engagement Committee, and we're going to be finding out about the museum's fellowship schemes and thinking about how to create partnerships with museums to engage public audiences. I'm very excited about this session, so I'm going to hand straight over to Rosanna to get things started for us.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So hi, I'm Rosanna, and I'm a member of the Outreach and Engagement Committee, and I might just let Lauren also say hello and introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lauren Deere. I'm a member of the Outreach and Engagement Committee, and it's lovely to be here today.
Yeah, and we also are really lucky to have Henrietta Lockhart here, who has participated as a host on behalf of Winterbourne House and Garden as a host of the fellowship scheme. I don't know, Henrietta, do you just want to turn your camera on and say hello so that people know?
Hello. Hi.
And Henrietta will talk to us a bit later on, but for now, I'm going to introduce the Outreach and Engagement Committee, what we do, and a little bit about the fellowships, and then we'll hear from Henrietta, who will talk about her experience. If we're lucky, we might have a fellow join us as well, but we'll see how that goes. And then Lauren will give us some top tips on partnerships at the end. Yes, thank you so much for joining this session. And let me get up my bits and pieces. So the Outreach and Engagement Committee is a sort of group from the BSHS. There's, I want to say, about 8 of us, but I haven't counted, and I should count now. There's more than 8 of us. No, there is 8 of us because we have an outgoing chair as well. So that includes all the people that you can see on the screen. Ross McFarlane is our chair. He's a new chair. We're very lucky to have him on board. But you may, if you've encountered the Outreach and Engagement Committee before, you might have encountered Rachel Boone, who's our outgoing chair. We were also extremely lucky to have her excellent chair. But Lenka Schmalish, myself, Lauren, Jean-Baptiste Goyon, Deborah Cohen, Heather Bennett, and Dr. Alan Jones, all part of the, oh, I love that he's got a doctor. I feel like is there only 2 doctors? I think Lenka's a doctor as well. I don't know. On the committee, we've got between us, we actually come from all over the place, don't we? So we've got experience in museums, collections, libraries, media, universities across the history of science, SciComm now, technology, medicine, history of SciComm, public engagement and education, so sort of formal learning. And we take different roles between us administering. The whole committee is keen to further sort of the understanding of the history of science, technology and medicine, and thinking about obviously outreach and engagement relating to that, so both informal and formal, so all with the public. So we do that via a range of prizes and grants. We have 3 prizes that are both administered every other year. I think that's correct. It includes the Ayrton Prize, which is for digital projects, which I think is coming up. I think we haven't had that one last year, so I think that'll be next year. The Hughes Prize, which is for book publications, and the Exhibiting Excellent Prize, which we've just had this year. And massive congratulations to our winners, the Whipple Museum of the History of Science and Jodrell Bank, for their really exciting, fabulous exhibitions. Go and see them. We also have the engagement fellowships, and the project grants, I should say. Project grants is funding that's 3 times yearly, £500, and that's administered by our colleagues Alan and Lenka, and is really, obviously we're talking about the engagement fellowships today, but as actually is a really interesting opportunity as well. So lots of the tips that we talk about here are probably transferable into applications for project grants as well, I would imagine. And the engagement fellowships, we offer 2 every year, and it's probably our sort of largest in terms of funding. It's I think our largest offer. Basically what we do is we advertise for host institutions that have collections relating to the history of science, technology, medicine, mathematics in some way or another, and that they have something that they want to bring to the public, and they can recruit. So we have money to recruit a fellow, a postgraduate in the area who has research experience, and offer them some experience actually doing that research and creating the engagement output as well. So they are eligible for, the host institution is eligible for £1,000 relating to those outputs and events that could come as a product of the fellow's work, and the fellow themselves is eligible to receive £2,000, so £1,000 at the beginning, £1,000 at the end, what was I going to say? So that is for 4 weeks of 35. It's now 35 hours a week, but you can spread that over a period that can be agreed between the host and the fellow. So we recruit for the hosts, and that usually goes out in springtime, and we tend to circulate that via lots of, in public engagement, outreach, SciComm, mailing lists, that kind of thing. So keep an eye out on those things, and also keep an eye on our Twitter, because it will always be advertised on our Twitter for hosts. And then we select the hosts, and then we try and turn it around so that the hosts could be recruited, the fellows could be recruited in the summer if possible. We know that's often a time that postgrads are looking for placements and things like that, but the placement can be offered really at any point that works best for the host institution and the fellow potentially as well. So it can be arranged discreetly as well. And we're on hand to support with creating the job advert if that's helpful, and circulating the adverts. And then beyond that, sort of supporting the fellow is up to the institution. And I feel like I actually meant to ask you, Lauren, about this before, so apologies. But currently we're supporting Alfred Denny Museum in Sheffield, and I don't know whether they've recruited already. They have. Okay, no, they haven't. So keep an eye out for that advert. This is why I wanted to say this. And they've got a really great entomology collection, and also St George's Museum at University of London. So that will be sort of medical collections. And so I think those adverts for fellows will be going out pretty soon, probably. So keep an eye out for those if you're interested. So yeah, Lauren's popped this slide up, and you can see a bit of an array of the sort of range of different fellowships we've supported in the past. And we can also, there's opportunities for you to write a blog for us as a fellow if you wanted, after you've done your project or when you're doing your project. Also, there's opportunities to perhaps be linked up to Viewpoint, our magazine, that kind of thing, and things you can do there. So we can support a bit with spreading the word, the good word as well. And I wanted to talk a little bit before we move on about, exactly what makes a great host. We couldn't quite tell who would be here if they wanted to join us, whether it would be hosts, whether it would be fellows, researchers, people thinking about how to partner up from different sides of the coin. So we usually get between sort of 10 and 20 applications, so we do get quite a few, and we're often looking to support smaller institutions or remote institutions. And I know actually Alfred Denny Museum and St George's are not examples of remote institutions based in Sheffield and London, but I do evidence that we will support like a sort of smaller body, even if they're supported by a bigger body, a bigger organisation. If it's just a sort of discrete thing, a discrete project, then we can still support that kind of thing. Don't be deterred from applying, because even though we want to consider all of these things, and we do consider them seriously, if there's a really standout application, we are, very interested in that as well. We really want history of science also to be brought to people who might not have really encountered history of science in their lives. So, bear that in mind, really think about your audience. Before I get into sort of questions here, it's worth saying that there's a double-sided application form. It's not too major, I don't think, compared to some of the things you've got to do. And in terms of accountability, we're also pretty chill about that, but you should take it seriously. So don't stress, but we do really want like fully fleshed out answers to the questions in our forms. We really want a well-conceived and a manageable project. There's something that can be done within that time, and that you've thought about how that can be done in that time by the person, like manageable workload. Something that's interesting for postgraduate students. So yeah, we really want you to think about the audience for your project really carefully. I think lots of people see the money and they think, oh my goodness, we've got this collection of this that's never been looked at before and I really need it looked at. And even though that actually could be a really exciting opportunity for a student, we really want to make that connection with the audience, not just, so we want both thoughts to be in there, and thinking about what is it within that collection that an audience might find exciting or interesting. Do you know already? Because if there's evidence of what an audience finds interesting, then that's really appealing to us as well. And think about also the sort of output that you're creating and whether that will connect with the audience, not just the content of the matter, but what you're doing with it. And yes, with that, I mean, these things are sort of, we consider them with equal merit. What opportunities and support can you offer to the fellows? We really want them to have a really constructive experience and to be supported appropriately. It's very easy to forget, isn't it, when you've worked in collections, that that sometimes people who've come straight through study, they actually haven't experienced the workplace before, or they might not have experienced the workplace like this, so just might need a little bit of training and support. And what impacts will your output have? Like, what difference could it make to you? What legacy will it have? What difference could it make to your audience? How sustainable is the output? Can you continue using it in the future? That kind of thing. What value does it have? We are also really interested in themes such as environment and climate change, health and well-being, diverse, inclusive stories, social justice, all those things. I mean, it doesn't have to be particularly related to those themes, but there is something that often piques our interest if we see it in an application form. So just bear those things in mind if you are interested in being a host, because we often get asked what we're looking for. Those are the kind of things. And now I think it's time for me probably to hand over to some people who have experienced the fellowships themselves. So I don't know, I think Henrietta, would you be happy to talk about your project, if that's all right? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I will try and share my screen. So how do I do that? Can you see that?
Yes, looks perfect.
Great, brilliant. Okay, so my name is Henrietta. I'm the curator at Winterbourne House and Garden, which is a historic house in Edgbaston in Birmingham. That's Winterbourne about 120 years ago. And we also have a botanic garden. And a few years ago, or just a couple of years ago, we took responsibility for the university herbarium. This herbarium had been developed from around 1904 onwards, although it contains specimens that go back to the beginning of the 19th century in some cases. And this herbarium had been without any active curation for about 20 years. It had ceased to be of use in the botanical department in the university. It was put in a basement and it was left there for many years without anybody taking any particular interest in it. It was moved to Winterbourne a couple of years ago. This is what it looks like. It's basically a room full of cabinets full of boxes which contain over 50,000 preserved plant specimens. We've been researching this collection over the last couple of years and trying to work out what it is we've got. And alongside it, we've had a lot of archival material. So it seemed to make sense to us to get a fellow in to research a particular aspect of this collection. This is Margaret Nettleford. She was the lady of the house. Winterbourne was built for her and her husband and family in 1904. And this is one of her botanical watercolours. She was a talented botanical artist, very passionate about botany, very serious about studying botany and plants. And we had no idea whether there was any connection between Margaret and the herbarium. We just knew that the herbarium being developed in the university, which was just across the road from Winterbourne. And in fact, Winterbourne now is owned by the University of Birmingham. So we were excited to find a letter which lists donors to a purchase fund to collect a particular collection of moss specimens, and this is back in 1907. And if you look on the right hand side, the fourth name up from the bottom is Mrs. Nettleford. So we know from this letter that Margaret actually contributed to the creation of the herbarium right at the start. And this seemed to be a really interesting angle to come into. We very much wanted to create an exhibition about the herbarium that would then communicate to all our visitors and our members as well. So we put in for a fellowship last year, and we appointed a lady who is studying a PhD at the University of Birmingham, so just across the road from us. Her actual subject is medieval herbalism and medicine. So not quite the same thing, but very much around botany and plants and the use of plants. And she came in to start working with us in January of this year. It was a brilliant project. She initially spent a lot of time actually transcribing all the correspondence that existed in the collection between Ernest Charles Horrell, who was the collector of this moss collection, and the university. So there was a lot of material around how he collected material, how he arranged his collection. There was also associated correspondence like this letter, which looked at how that collection was then acquired for the university. She also looked at some of Horrell's specimens, and we have, I would say, over 1,000 specimens from Horrell. He was incredibly meticulous about his collecting. He arranged the items on the page along with detailed information about exactly where they were collected, how they were collected, when they were collected. And so there was a lot of material there for Beth to get her teeth into in terms of where he was collecting and how he was going about that process. He also exchanged specimens with other botanic gardens across the world, other collectors. So there was a lot of exchange going on. And some of the pages of the specimens are laid out like this, with little packets and envelopes, which give you this international feel. He also drew his own diagrams. He included those with his specimens. So there was, he was a really serious and dedicated collector. And through the research that Beth was able to do, we really kind of got a new understanding of him and the range of his activity and the significance of his collection, his really comprehensive collection. So the output of all this was that we were able to get some of these items digitized, and we also had some of these digitized. This is one of Horrell's sets of microscopic slides of moss specimens. We have several boxes of these, and I mean, not only are they just beautiful objects in themselves, but they're also kept in purpose-made cardboard folders that they're just magnificent things in themselves. So this is our Herbarian Exhibition, which we were able to open just a couple of weeks ago, and we obviously included in that exhibition a whole range of themes that we've been able to draw out from this amazing collection. And we were able to do a specific feature based on the work that Beth has done on E.C. Horrell. So from all the transcription that she'd done, all the research, we were able to draw out quotes from Horrell and create the text for a panel and a display in which we actually got corals, specimens and microscopic slides on display. So that was the kind of physical output of the project, and then there was also written output as well. So Beth did an Object of the Month feature for our members' electronic newsletter, which goes out to 7,000 people, and she was talked there about corals, specimens he was collecting. And she contributed to our printed members magazine, which has just gone out a few weeks ago. So that is Beth's article in that newsletter, which I'll send a copy to you, Rosanna. And I think she's going to be writing a blog and doing other academic kind of reports as well as a result of the project. So it was a really, really positive experience for us, and I think for the fellow as well. She spread her work over about 3 months. So she was doing a couple of days a week during that period, spending a lot of time just really getting stuck into the specimens and the correspondence. And what she's left us is a whole body of transcription and research material that we're going to be able to draw on in the future as well. And obviously the public output is primarily the exhibition, which I mean, we have about 80,000 visitors a year at Winterbourne. That's gradually growing, and our audience is also diversifying quite a lot at the moment. So we are getting more audiences in who are from different parts of the community. So hopefully that message about how exciting the history of this herbarium is will get across to people. Obviously, we are ourselves, we're not a science institution, we're a historic house and a botanic garden. So this has enabled us to kind of really delve into this history in a way that we might not have been able to do ourselves. So thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Henrietta. I feel like that was actually a perfect mix of like the sort of scope and you can see the sense of what can be achieved actually with this kind of project, but also the practicalities are really useful to hear about as well. And yeah, we should spread the love of moss further, I feel, because it's just cool, isn't it? And I think sadly our fellow is not being able to join us, who was a fellow at Pennine Heritage, but we are lucky that her host, staff member from Pennine Heritage, Francesca Elliott, is around. And I wonder, Francesca, whether you would be willing to just say a little bit about your experience, perhaps thinking about Kelly's experience as well, if you can, that sort of thing. Sorry to put you on the spot. Hope that's okay.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry that Kelly couldn't join us, and I don't have a presentation or anything because I thought that she would be presenting. But yeah, I'm very happy to say a little bit about her project. So as you said, I am Heritage Manager at Pennine Heritage. We're a very small heritage charity based in the small town of Hebden Bridge in West Yorkshire. Very beautiful small town if anyone wants to come and visit. And we manage a historic site in a 19th century former Baptist chapel. And we also have the South Pennine Archives, which is a very extensive local history archive. So we've got quite a large physical document archive, but also we have about 50,000 digitized historic photographs. And that's been built up entirely by volunteers over the last 15 years or so. So it's one of the largest collections of digitized photographs, certainly in the South Pennines region. And currently most of the public engagement work that we do is through exhibitions on site and through events and exhibition weekends and things like that. But we're wanting to really expand our educational offering for schools. And this fellowship was a perfect opportunity to do that, because we'd identified that within our collections we had quite a strong history of nursing theme running through both our physical and digital collections. And I come from a history of science background myself, but not at all medicine or nursing or anything like that. And so we thought it would be brilliant to use the fellowship to get someone in who had that subject expertise. And so we recruited Kelly from the University of Huddersfield, who's a history of nursing PhD student, and she came in. And so the aim of the project was for her to explore our history of nursing collections and then develop a schools workshop around those collections. What actually ended up happening was that when word got out among our community about this fellowship, a community member came forward with a brand new nursing collection to donate to our archive, which is a biographical collection about one nurse called Mary Atack, who lived and worked in Hebden Bridge as a nurse and then travelled all over the country during the Second World War, nursing in prisoner of war camps. And so this community member, who's a descendant of or relative of nurse Atack, donated a collection which gave a really thorough, amazing picture of her life, and had all sorts of photographs and wonderful documents from her career and letters and national identity cards and driving licenses and just an entire picture of this woman's career. And so the fellowship initially became about organising that collection, and so Kelly actually got the opportunity to learn how we take a collection that's been donated without any kind of organisational cataloguing, and how we catalogue that, and then decide which pieces to use in the project. And so she really got to take it from scratch right through organising it, getting it into the archive, and then developing a schools workshop. Now that I say it, I don't know how she managed to get all of that done in the period of the fellowship, but she did. And at the end of it, we had a Key Stage 2 schools workshop ready, all about Nurse Atack. And we've now had 3 different schools who have come and done the workshop on site with us. So a really, really positive outcome for us, because that was kind of the dream end goal, was that we would actually have a usable schools workshop that we could start marketing to our local schools, and that has been the outcome, and as well as the additional unexpected outcome of having a wonderful new collection added to our archives. So yeah, it's been a really positive experience. I'm sorry that Kelly's not here to talk about her end of things, but she gave us very good feedback about the experience too. I think she really enjoyed the opportunity to get off campus and start putting some of her skills into practice in the real world setting, and also a chance to see some of the different jobs that are available in the heritage sector for someone with the skills that she's getting from her PhD. So yeah, it was a really great experience for us, and I definitely recommend it to my network and anyone else I know who is at a small institution like ours, particularly because the thing we struggle most for is having time to invest in projects like this, and then of course the range of expertise when you've got a local history archive that covers all sorts of different occupations and industries and everything. So being able to get someone in with the expertise on the particular topic that you're looking for was really valuable. So yeah, I don't know, I'm happy to chime in later at the Q&A or whatever would be useful.
Thank you so much. Sorry again, but yeah, actually very lucky to have you to explain about the project, because I didn't, Lauren, so we sort of take one each, me and Lauren, and so Lauren was looking with you, working with you, I think, and so I don't get to, it sounds really exciting. It's very nice to hear about the projects as well from our end. So before we get to the Q&A, I will just hand over to Lauren, who will introduce what work she does as well, I think, and as well as some tips for sort of partnership working. So over to you, Lauren.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I know I said my name earlier, but I didn't introduce my background a little bit, so I'll do that now. So I currently work at the University of Birmingham within the Central Public and Cultural Engagement team, and my role at the moment is to support individual academics and postgraduate researchers as they engage the public with their research. So that does cover kind of history of science, but also lots of other disciplines that are covered here at the university. And before I joined the university about 3 years ago, I worked within the museum and cultural sector, and I was the museum manager at Think Tank Birmingham Science Museum for a while. So I can kind of, my next section is try to pull in both of those areas of, and also just chatting with Rosanna as well about what our recommendations are about how researchers in particular can kind of engage with museums and some of the kind of tips for that partnership working. So this next section is very much focused from a researcher perspective, but hopefully also if there's any hosts out there in the audience, they might chime with some of the things we're saying, and also very happy to hear comments from that perspective later on as well. So I'll just share my screen and get some slides to share with you all. So well, here are some of our kind of our top tips for connecting with museums and collections. So first of all, we're recommending that you kind of have a think about what research what museums collections might be accessible to you. So familiarize yourself with the collections and museums relevant to your area of research. Identify particular maybe collections, archives, or exhibits that are related to your particular area of research, and just kind of making connections and establishing those kind of identifying the common interests that you might have with a particular museum. That not just relates to kind of collections, but also thinking about broader anniversaries that might be coming up, any looking in the kind of future. Obviously museums and collections do plan around particular calendars, so if there are particular awareness weeks or areas that or big anniversaries coming up that relate to the collection and also relate to your research, it's a nice way to kind of identify those kind of commonalities between your own work and the work of museums, and finding that kind of mutual beneficial element that might be the potential for a new partnership. Another tip is around establishing relationships. So there are lots of different ways to do that. There are kind of museum events, there are national events like the Museums Association Conference, there are regional conferences for museum networks. There are often networking sessions and kind of events that bring together different museums and curators and curators of particular areas of expertise, and kind of roundtable sessions that are led by universities and universities and museum collaborations. So it's around really kind of scoping out what might be around in your local area or in your region, and kind of getting out there and starting those conversations and building those networks with curators, curatorial staff, and also museum professionals. And it just hopefully those kind of conversations will kind of pique some kind of common interests and spark that kind of commonality in terms of approach as well. As well as the Museums Association, there are a couple of other organisations which we would recommend. So there's the Association of Science and Discovery Centres, which do predominantly work with science centres, but also they have a lot of science museums and archives within their group. So they have an annual conference and they have lots of networking sessions. And another group that we would recommend is the National Centre for the Coordination of Public Engagement, NCCPE. So they work predominantly with universities and public engagement specialists. But they also have lots of networking sessions and an annual conference which brings together academics and also those from the cultural sector together to kind of discuss how connections can be made. So once you have a kind of maybe a partner in mind and an approach that you want to take with them, it's around kind of crafting a clear proposal. So thinking about ways that you can create a kind of compelling partnership option for the museum or collection that you want to work with, and really kind of clearly articulating within that how your research can kind of enhance the museum's exhibits or educational programs or public engagement initiatives. To kind of really highlight the unique contribution that you as an individual can make and how it kind of you can align with the museum or collection's mission. I think it's important to showcase the kind of relevance and impact of the research that you're doing, yes, to the museum and to the audience that they're working with, but also to the kind of broader discipline, and illustrate how your work can maybe provide some fresh insights, some new stories, a different perspective, and help interpret maybe existing collections that they might have, and then thinking about how that relates to the kind of broader impact of your research more long term as well. Just help you make a kind of really kind of compelling partnership proposal when you approach them. Thinking particularly about public engagement opportunities. So obviously museums and collections serve particular audiences. They have programs which enable those diverse audiences to engage with their collections in lots of different ways, and being able to be part of that public engagement offer as an individual by being able to maybe lead workshops or develop resources that can be shared is really important. Often, as a couple of our speakers today have mentioned, that they might not have that particular area of expertise within their staffing model already. So actually being able to kind of join and support that, and being a new face for their audiences to engage with, really provides a new opportunity for that museum or that collections audience to engage with new people and learn directly from researchers, which is a really important element of public engagement, having that kind of interface between the public and researchers. Funding is an important one. We all know that the funding landscape for museums and collections is very challenging and has been for a long time, and is unlikely to change. So actually thinking about, as a researcher, what options you might have to being able to tap into different funding streams that museums aren't traditionally able to, whether that be from a research grant or by organisations that or maybe if you are associated with a university, thinking about alumni donations, thinking about larger pots of money that universities have. I know here at the University of Birmingham we have a public engagement fund which people can apply to support their work and can support partnerships with community and cultural organisations. So maybe within your organisation there might be pots of impact funding or engagement funding that you can kind of draw on. And I think it's just important to add that probably a lot of maybe museums and cultural or collections organisations might not have access to those funds traditionally, and actually that's something you can possibly bring to a partnership. And it's important that to think about factoring in both staff time for yourself when you're factoring in the cost of those projects, and also for any resources and staff time that the museum might have to commit to by being part of that partnership. Next tip is around respecting museums' policies and procedures. So I think this will kind of be part of the kind of conversation, setting out the kind of the basics of a project, but it's really important to understand any restrictions that there might be around accessing collections, handling particular objects, access to particular spaces, in terms of when those buildings are open, and if you are conducting experiments within or other types of research within the museum space, thinking about the implications of that. Trying to have a conversation early on about kind of ethical considerations, any copyright law or intellectual property rights that might be throughout the partnerships is really helpful too. And actually the next point, which is around maintaining effective communication, is that kind of, I guess that starts right from the beginning. I think thinking about your partnership that you might make within with a museum or a collection, thinking about how you can establish those effective communication channels right from the beginning, having a direct point of contact throughout the project, and actually discussing with them early on around what their expectations are from either side, so you can kind of establish that early on. The National Centre for Coordination of Public Engagement a few years ago developed a project which was called the MUPI project, MUPI, which was around developing museum and university partnerships. And they created this really fabulous card game, which was developed to enable those initial conversations when you're making arrangements with a partner, which will really help you kind of develop that dialogue around expectations and what from either side, and what the kind of outputs and aims of a project would be. And that's available on their website. So if you're thinking about reaching out to a new partner, it might be helpful to have a look at those and then use those kind of cards to kind of instigate some of the initial conversations that you might have with them. And then our final tip is around acknowledging and promoting the museum. So I guess giving credit to the museum's contribution to the support of your publications, presentations, or any kind of public engagement activity that you do outside of the partnership. and I guess promoting the exhibits, events and education programs that you might have contributed to through your networks, either at your institution or with any other kind of broader networks that you're part of. So really showcasing the partnership and raising awareness for that kind of connection that you have with them. And just remember that every museum and collection is unique. They have unique requirements. They have different sizes and scales, so you might need to adapt these tips accordingly, but hopefully they will help you to maybe start some new projects, reach out to someone new within your area that you've been wanting to work with for a while. And I would say that the Outreach and Engagement Committee, within the group, we have various elements of expertise, and we're here to kind of support the wider society. We have a generic email address, so please feel free to send over any inquiries to that, and then as a group we can see who's best to kind of maybe have a quick chat with you or a quick email chat about recommendations for that. So please do get in touch with us. We're a very friendly bunch, and we are keen to do more and support the society as a whole, and and we'd be very excited to hear from you. So we're going to ask, so that's the end of all of our presentations, and we're going to stop now for questions for us all. So if you would like to ask any questions, we'll be able to spot them in the Q&A section. So just type them in, and then we'll pick them up from there as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'll have a look and see if we've got any questions that have come through.
We have got a question in the chat that says, do you think that presenting the history of science, I love this question, in small museums changes the flavour of the encounter for the public in contrast to, for example, to the Science Museum in London? I don't know who wants to take this question, because we've got two fairly smallish collections here that might, I don't know what you feel about this, whether you guys would be willing to offer your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, if I can jump in first, I think this is really important because I mean, we're a small museum, we're a historic house, and a lot of our visitors come expecting to see a kind of National Trust type, historic house, and in some ways we are kind of like that. But we really do try to interpret within our presentation in the house the elements of history of science that are relevant to our site, and that goes across both our history as a botanic garden. We've been the University Botanic Garden for a long time, and there have been a lot of important scientific research projects taking place on site in the past, so we interpret that. But being able to take on the herbarium and to present an exhibition about that in the main house, I think is possibly a surprise to visitors, because they don't necessarily expect to see something about the history of science and history of botany in that setting. But it does engage a lot of members of the public, and I think what it puts across is that science isn't something that's in a little separate bubble. It's particularly historically, it's been part of everybody's life, and the fact that we have an example of Margaret Nettleford, who was one of the first builders of commissioners of Winterbourne, who was also an avid plant collector, a botanical illustrator, someone who really took seriously the study of plants. And she wasn't a professional, she wasn't a botanist, she was an ordinary person, but she was engaging in science at quite an academic level, and translating that into her life in terms of her development of her garden, and also, of course, putting her money where her mouth was in terms of helping to develop the academic facility of the herbarium at the university. So there's an ordinary person who is making a contribution to the body of scientific knowledge, and that is true of so many of the plant collectors that are represented in our herbarium. These are ordinary people, not necessarily professionals, not necessarily trained academics, who were going out doing kind of citizen science, if you like, and then contributing to the body of knowledge. So I think it's really important that those sorts of elements of the history of science are actually presented in contexts where people don't necessarily expect to see them. So while it's great that we have, you know, the Science Museum and think tank and organisations that are specifically dedicated to doing that, it's really important that those things occur in small museums as well.
Yeah, I think I mean, my answer would be quite similar in a lot of ways, in that the fact that we have such a local and regional focus means that we can really talk about the real people, and for our audiences make it very relatable on that level. And particularly because our project was aimed at children, the fact that the person we were talking about, the nurse that we were talking about, she lived on a street 2 streets away from their school, and being able to kind of bring it home to them that people from their community have always been involved in nursing in this case, but you know, different types of science and medicine, I think is really valuable. And I've actually, when I've spoken to colleagues at other small local heritage sites and mentioned this fellowship, and they've said, oh, science, history of science, you're not a science collection. And I've had to point out, well, actually, you know, we've got nursing and medicine and many different types of industry in our collection, and you can find a lot of history of science within most local history collections. So yeah, that's been really good for us, I think, to emphasize those connections. And for developing a schools program, it's really good for the curriculum links as well, because our main kind of inroad into the curriculum is through the local history segment that schools have to do, and that they often find it very hard to find activities to fill. Actually, that's you know, feedback that we've had from our scoping with local schools, is that finding stories of local people to meet that local history requirement in the curriculum can be really difficult. And so being able to fill that with a local person who also fits a STEM kind of narrative for the schools is really useful.
Amazing. And actually, it just links to another question that we've had in the chat, actually, Francesca, so, which is about can you share any public feedback from the project? And I just wonder, actually, have you had much feedback from the schools that you've engaged with so far?
Yeah, so when the session was first developed, Kelly and I did a pilot session with the local schools, so we offered it to them for free in exchange for their feedback. And so we got feedback then from both the teacher and from the children, which I think is a really important part of developing any school session, is, you know, what the children thought about it. And it was overall really positive. They really liked that it could key into so many different elements of the curriculum, because it's, you know, it's history, there's a geography element because she traveled all over the country in her work as a nurse, there's a science element because we talk about some of the different materials and techniques that she would have used. We have a World War II first aid kit that we bring out for the children so they can see the kind of things that she would have been carrying with her. So the fact that it can link into so many different elements of the curriculum, the teachers really loved. And it also meant for the children that if they had a big range of interests, most of them could find part of the session that they really engaged with. So yeah, really, really positive feedback. And then since we've been offering it officially as a workshop to schools, we've also solicited feedback after the fact so that we can keep tweaking it. But yeah, it's overall been very positive. And we have the World War II first aid kit, and then we also actually bring out some of the real archive documents for the children to look at. And that's something that they really responded to, the fact that, you know, they were holding something in their hands in a folder that was really from World War II and really from someone who lived down the street from them. Yeah, really, really connected with them.
I think that really connects to like a more of a comment that we've had in the Q&A box, maybe you spotted, Lauren, as well, from Rebecca, saying, actually, you know, there's opportunities in small museums that you can't always have in these large scale organizations as well, which that's exactly what you're saying, isn't it, Francesca, that what National could bring out the actual archive material to the children, you know, that's so exciting. And you do just have that direct relationship, person to person relationship that you're able to have in your communities. That is like just so much.
Yeah.
You're so fortunate, even though I'm sure there's so many barriers, and it is also a challenge to be a small collection. Like, it is an exciting thing to have as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we found. We have a partnership with the University of Huddersfield, so we have placement students from there coming and working with us quite regularly, and we have found one of the really valuable things we can offer is that we can, you know, we could allow Kelly to catalogue that new collection with guidance and supervision, which, you know, a larger archive with a staff of archivists probably wouldn't be able to do. So yeah, we are able to kind of give them very, very hands-on opportunities because we need all the help we can get. So yeah.
Fabulous. I don't think we have any more questions that have popped up, and we're coming round to the end time of the session anyway. So I'll just hand over to Charlotte in a second. But thank you, Henrietta and Francesca, on behalf of the committee anyway, for coming along today and talking about it, and also being such amazing participants in our grant programme. It's been really fabulous working with you both.
Wonderful. Thank you also, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren, Rosanna, Henrietta and Francesca. This has been such an illuminating session, I think, and it's really shown us the benefits of the kinds of partnerships that the BSHS can facilitate, both for the you know, the early career researchers and for the institutions as well, and just sort of showing how museums can be quite fleet of foot and responsive to their communities and their visitors. So that's amazing. So if you're inspired by this work and you'd like to get involved, do join the BSHS. Membership starts at just £10 if you are economically disadvantaged in some way. So get involved, support it, perhaps apply, go visit your local museum, have a think about what you could do with them. Don't forget to look at the programme. There's lots of exciting things happening today. It's the last day, so your last chance to watch live, but everything's available later on recording, so check in with those as well. So in the meantime, goodbye from me, and